They spoke of unity, of welcoming all, of a Jubilee that would embrace every believer. But when thousands of Catholics devoted to tradition dared to present themselves on their pilgrimage, the Vatican first welcomed them, and then erased them, like a name written in the sand. Why them? What fear lies behind this silent exclusion? It's not just a matter of timing, it's the sign of an underground battle over the future of the Church. Stay until the end, because what emerges from this story is much more disturbing than they would have us believe. It had been in the air for some time, and now it has happened. Tensions between the Holy See and the priestly society of St. Pius X have exploded again, belying any illusion of a lasting peace. The latest episode is merely the tip of an iceberg that has been surfacing and resurfacing for decades, with Rome on the one hand promising dialogue and acceptance, and on the other striking with decisions that have all the flavor of implicit condemnation. The fact that the fuse was lit precisely by the Jubilee, an event that is supposed to embody unity and reconciliation, makes the story even more disturbing. Many observers consider this the inevitable outcome of an artificially relaxed climate. For months, in fact, positive news about relations between the Vatican and the Society had been multiplying, almost as if to give the impression of a normalization. But every apparent truce in the history of relations with the Lefebvrists has always been followed by a cold shower. And that's what happened again, with timing that seems designed to remind everyone that despite the diplomatic smiles, the fraternity remains a foreign body, tolerated but not accepted. The faithful, who fill the fraternity's chapels throughout the world, continue to receive valid sacraments, but always surrounded by the aura of irregularity. Rome, for its part, limits itself to talking about dialogue without taking any real steps towards a definitive solution. The feeling is that the Holy See prefers to maintain this ambiguity, almost as if it were a weapon to be used when needed. Tolerance on alternate days, sudden corrections when the media or ecclesiastical climate requires it. The most sensational event occurred in mid-August. The Society of St. Pius X, which had been officially included in the Jubilee calendar with its own pilgrimage to Rome, was suddenly removed from the Vatican website without any explanation. An episode that cannot be dismissed as a simple technical oversight, because the pilgrimage had been announced, publicized, planned, and had already attracted thousands of faithful from all over the world. Their presence at St. John Lateran, with the public rosary and the procession through the Holy Door, was expected as a joyful and impressive testimony of faith. Yet, just days before the event, the Vatican removed all references to the initiative, leaving only the other pilgrimages, past and future, on the calendar, all except the Lefebvrian one, a gesture that cannot fail to be interpreted as a deliberate act of exclusion. What's particularly striking is the hypocrisy of the official message accompanying the Jubilee. A year for everyone, no one excluded. But the facts tell the opposite story. Everyone is welcome except those who refuse to bow to the Council's new principles. For many traditional Catholics, this removal is not just a symbolic affront, but a real wound. A pilgrimage that should have strengthened ties with Rome has transformed into a sign of hostility, a silent but resounding "you are not one of us." Instead of seeking unity, the Holy See has chosen the path of public humiliation, demonstrating that the problem of the fraternity has not been resolved at all, but on the contrary is being used as a testing ground to measure fidelity to the new ecclesial course. The cancellation of the pilgrimage was not an isolated incident. Almost simultaneously, another front opened with the statements of Cardinal Anders Arborelius, Archbishop of Stockholm. Diocesan Ordinary decided to point the finger at the Society of St. Pius XII after Monsignor Bernard Fellet had administered the sacrament of confirmation to the faithful attached to tradition. This is a normal gesture for a Catholic bishop, but in the case of the Society, it immediately becomes scandalous, so much so as to provoke public letters and official warnings. In a statement released to the diocese, the Cardinal called on Catholics to full unity with Rome and warned against participation in the sacraments of the fraternity, which he branded as lacking legitimate canonical status. The reality is that Monsignor Fellet's confirmations are entirely valid. No one, not even the most ardent critics, dares deny it. And yet, this very evidence is what is disturbing. Faithful Catholics, especially young people, receive a sacrament that strengthens them in their faith, but they receive it from the hands of a bishop whom Rome continues to consider irregular. The contradiction is glaring. Instead of rejoicing for souls becoming more deeply rooted in the Church, some prelates choose to stir up controversy, ultimately dividing and confusing the faithful. The point is clear. It is not the validity of the sacraments that is of concern, but rather their visibility outside of diocesan episcopal control. The fraternity, with its bishops without territorial jurisdiction, represents an entity that escapes the clutches of an increasingly bureaucratic ecclesiastical power. The historical truth is that the Society was never born against the Church, but within the Church. It was the official Church, or rather that part of the hierarchy, that made the Council an untouchable dogma, that decided to expel it from the canonical perimeter. And even today, decades later, this wound remains open, fueling mistrust and suspicion. The controversy raised by the cardinals, far from strengthening unity, highlights a fundamental contradiction. The official Church accepts dialogue with communities that have lost the sacraments and apostolic succession, but considers Catholics who live tradition without compromise dangerous. A logic that overturns the hierarchy of values and makes the accusation of division leveled against the fraternity a sensational paradox. The real question that remains open is this: how long will Rome want to keep this wound alive? Because every act of exclusion, every accusation of illegitimacy only fuels the belief that the official Church fears tradition more than it fears secularism and heresy. Sooner or later, someone will have to have the courage to recognize that the problem isn't the fraternity, but the crisis that has been undermining the Church from within for 60 years. Only then can there be authentic reconciliation, born not of compromise, but of truth. Until that day, the faithful will continue to seek their strength in the sacraments and the traditional liturgy, even if they are despised or ignored by those who should safeguard them. This is the most painful and at the same time most eloquent contradiction of our time. The institutional Church that marginalizes its own tradition, and the tradition that, despite everything, continues to keep the Church alive. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment Amen. God bless you.